Good evening and welcome to our school board work session. It is August 11th and the time is now 5:30 p.m. Our new mission statement: as a community, we create supportive learning environments where all students thrive. Mrs. Richardson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Burgess?
Here.
Here. Mr. Dorn?
Here.
Miss Julian?
Here.
Miss Maple?
Here.
Mrs. Hardy is excused. Mrs. Burnett?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are moving on into our policy work on Article 6. Miss Diana Dillard, Student Discipline and Policy Specialist, along with Dr. Meinert, Superintendent, will work with board members on Article 6 instruction. Board Policy 935.1, Establishing of Charter Schools, and Board Policy 935.23, Application Procedure for Establishing a Charter School contract with the school board, to get them ready to transfer over to the Association of Alaska School Boards platform. Ms. Dillard.
Thank you much. We're going to have first policy up on the screen, and we're going to start with Board Policy 935.23, which is Charter School Contract with the School Board. Alaska Association of School Boards actually released a full new article, Article 10, this summer. And so there's going to be a lot of charter school policy revisions in the future. But at this time, we're bringing these two charter school policies that are in our Chapter 9, and will stay in Chapter 9 for now because of House Bill 57 and laws that were enacted with that House bill as of July 1. Okay. So with this first one, Alaska Statute 1403255C lists provisions that must be included in a contract between a charter school and the local school board. So with House 57, that was expanded that list to include a new provision that each charter school contract must contain a clause providing that the local school board may only terminate a contract under the standards and procedures established in AS 1403256. And so that's actually a new statute. And we got feedback from the legal team on what we needed to do to meet the requirements of the new House Bill 57. And this revision, all that we added here was the "and" provisions required by AS 1403255C. In all bold and caps right there in the middle, that is the only change that we're recommending at this time for this policy.
Thank you, Ms. Dillard. Any questions from the board regarding this policy? Mr. Dorn.
I'm sorry, I have to get back in the habit of turning on the mic. So this is only referencing the contract, not the application. This particular 935.23.
That is correct. And if you look at the title of the policy, it is Charter Schools Application Procedure for Establishing a Charter School Contract. So it's also specific to that initial contract that you would be doing with an initial application, but this is specific to the contract, yes.
So, and if I caught what you said, the provision that's required by the new law is regarding a short thing on termination. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is there a reason that we don't just put that phrase in? Because otherwise, people don't know what the law, I mean, they have to go elsewhere to find it. And if it's just a short sentence, I would suggest we say what that sentence is.
I could read you the provisions from House Bill 57. It's more than a sentence. It's about a paragraph as far as the additional provisions for what has to be in the contract termination clause. The recommendation was just to reference the statute, but we could look at the language if you'd like.
Follow up, Mr. Dorn.
I think we should look at putting, if it's a short paragraph, I don't like long policies as they are, but if it saves someone from having to jump around, I would suggest that if it's pretty short, we put it in. at that, what that length would be.
I guess, and I would just add, Mr. Dorn, that there's a lengthy piece to that statute that goes over all of the requirements of what has to be in a contract, and we don't have all of those requirements currently listed out in this policy. So there was, as part of the statute, there's already requirements, and there's a few addition to those requirements. We don't have all of those requirements listed out here for the contract.
Let's continue conversation and maybe come back, Maitland.
Ms. Julian.
Thank you. I'm going to speak in support of the revision as it's made. And the reason that I am supporting keeping it as is and referencing the law is that when a charter school puts forth an application and goes through this very intensive process, I would hope that they will have also read the state statute on charter schools. And I think that for duplicative reasons, referencing that law and even linking that law versus writing it all out, if there's any changes in the future, it's easier for us to maintain our policies. And it's also, I think it's perfectly reasonable to expect that somebody putting forth this application will have already read through and looked through the state statute that we're referencing. So I support it as written.
Thank you, Mrs. Julian. I would as well support this as written. Further questions from the board? Seeing none at this time, we'll go back to Ms. Dillard.
Next policy? Okay. The next charter school policy is 935.1, establishment of a charter school. And so this is up on the screen now. Alaska Statute 1403-250A currently requires each local school board to prescribe an application procedure for establishment of a charter school. House Bill 57 added 2 sentences to that existing statute. And with the first one is the application procedure must allow an application to be submitted at any time during a school year for the following school year. And then the second addition is a local school board shall announce the deadline to submit an application for establishment of a charter school for the following year. Sorry, yes.
No, you're good. Thank you.
So as far as this draft language, also, we did get this from support from legal to draft this policy revision. If you look at sentences number 1 and number 3 in that first paragraph, those are required per the House Bill 57. Those are the 2 sentences that we just went over. And then the rest of the policy is recommended by legal. There's the 1 sentence there in the first paragraph, second sentence that defines school year, so they recommended that. And then the rest of the remaining policy is language informing potential applicants that the school board may reject applications that seek to establish a new charter school on short notice, and that a new charter may not necessarily be approved for commencing operation at the start of the academic year.
Questions from the board? Mr. Doran.
My concerns here is perhaps needing clarification, but the first paragraph, and I like the definition in there of the school year, and it does say that an application can be submitted anytime. But then in the next one, we're saying we're putting a deadline for which seems to be in opposition to can apply anytime. So that's one of my first concern. I have some other concerns within an understanding, but maybe you can address how we can have no deadline, but then we have a deadline.
Dr. Miner?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. So, the state statute isn't entirely clear either, the way that it was drafted, with the way the updates were drafted. And so the district is required to accept applications all year, but there's no reason that the district can't set a deadline, and it actually says that we need to announce that deadline in terms of operation of the establishment of the charter for the following year. So that's kind of the addendum of what flexibility the board has in determining if it's after a certain date, then you can say when that charter can start operations within the school district. In the past, our policy had said we don't accept applications after October 1st. So if an application came in March, we would still need to accept that application, work through it in the 60-day time frame, but then the board, if they enact this policy, that charter would not go into effect until the following year in January 1.
Okay, so if I follow up and
Yeah,
clarification,
absolutely.
to understand then that the law says we have to accept the application, but we can set a deadline for acting. Okay, so it sounds like we still have to act on it within 60 days, but if it's after October 1 by our thing, we can set October 1, so it would not go into the, if it came in after October 1, it would not be acted on in consideration for that following school year, but the school year a year later.
That's correct.
And that's allowable under the law.
It is. That's
Okay.
Legal guidance was helped us draft this policy.
Okay,
Yep.
great. That's what I was hoping for. And then I have another question, but we can go.
No, we'll come back to Mr. Dorn. Go ahead, Miss Carol Hubbard.
Thank you. So I too just want to clarify, just to make sure that I understand. Do we have a deadline? Okay, let me see. The end of the paragraph says to begin operation the following year, or may not begin until the following year until January 1st. So if it's a late submission, it's any time after October 1st, then it wouldn't be the following fall, it would be the following winter. Am I getting that right? And do we have any deadline? Like if there's an application put in March, would that be then also a January start? If there's this application put in September, would that also be no, it would be September 1st would be for the next fall, right?
Anything submitted after October 1st. So September would be the next fall. If it was
Okay.
after October 1st, like your March example, then it would be January of the next year.
Would there be any time that we would there be any time where we would say, no, we're not going to do a January start, it would be a fall start instead of, like if they applied in June, would that be a January start or would that be a fall start?
June would,
Sorry, it's a little
Would
muddy.
depend on
That's
their
why I'm
application.
asking, I think.
yeah.
Mr. Dorn, back to you. Oh, hang on, Mr. Dorn. Mr. Burgess.
So I don't know. I'm not an attorney or anything, but but I think they couldn't even apply according to this in June because that would be after the end of our school year, right? The school year ends usually in mid-May. I wanted to speak to that point. But in general, I would just want to say I'm very supportive of this policy as it's written. I appreciate defining the school year, and I think it's a great definition. It's instructional time for students, and I appreciate that because especially because the administration and the board are not typically active in the summer, so having to call everybody in would be burdensome. I also think that these deadlines are good, and I think I appreciate pushing the start date to mid-semester, or sorry, mid-school year, second semester essentially. I am a little bit confused by some of the language in that paragraph with the dates, especially that first sentence that includes September 1st. Is the point there that the administration is supposed to announce the deadline by September for the deadline to apply by September 1st at each year?
That's correct.
Okay. It might need a little tweaking to wordsmithing to clarify.
The exact statute language is a local school board shall announce the deadline to submit an application for establishment of a charter school for the following year. So I think that September 1st was the date picked by legal to be the deadline, to direct administration of when that deadline should be.
Okay. Okay. If that's the intent, I would, I don't have it, but I would suggest that we rearrange that sentence a little bit to make it more clear of the intent.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Mr. Dorn?
Okay, coming back to the January one, that was the similar question that I had. I think that becomes very confusing because it does open the door that a school could open mid-year. I think it confuses and we need perhaps better clarity on what the following school year is that we're talking about, which is really potentially a year and a half later, rather than just the following school year. Going from 25, we are now in the following school year of 25 to 26. But if someone submitted after October 1st, we would really be talking about 26, 27. The January 1 is a mid-year that doesn't coincide with anything else. So I think minimally that should be deleted. And we should give better clarification to what we mean by the following school year, which is really 2 years subsequent.
Can I take attempt at clarifying? And so let's use this year as an example. A charter application comes in November. We work through it. Board takes action in December. Per this policy, it would begin in the school year of 26, 27, but it would be January of 27 that it would start.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. You completely confused me because now we're opening the school in January of 27.
Yes.
Yes.
So a school can start mid-school year.
It could. I mean, that's what this is
Fair.
saying is that
That's okay. That's what it's saying. Do we want a school to open mid-school year, or is our intent really that it'd open the following school it would open as a school year? And
I don't think we have that latitude under the way that the statute's written. We can get legal guidance on that, but I believe it has to operate the next school year. But that gives us the flexibility that it doesn't start in the fall of that school year. So gives everybody time to prep whatever needs to take place for a fully functioning school to operate and get off the ground, which would be that mid-year start.
okay, then I would request we really get legal on this because it seems that it does shift our budget completely very much because we'd have to adjust funds mid-year. The movement of kids mid-year, it seems logistically very problematic. If the law was written with problems in it, then we need to address that. But if we're really suggesting that it's feasible to open a school mid-school year is, um, as opposed to the following school year, not calendar year. So I think we need some real clarification on that.
Yeah, we can bring back clarification on that.
Thank you, Mr. Dorn. Miss Carol Hubbard and then Miss Julian.
I just want to support Mr. Dorn's comments. I think I'm kind of concerned about a school starting in January. If that's the law, then we have to follow that. And I don't want to do anything against the law, of course, but I do find it very, feels like it would be upsetting. And rather than repeat everything he just said, I'm just on board with what he said, and I would like some clarification on that and to make sure that we understand that fully, please.
Read the law again. So the additions were the application procedure must allow an application to be submitted at any time during the school year for the following school year. A local school board shall announce the deadline to submit an application for establishment of a charter school for the following year. That's the extent.
Miss Julian.
Thank you. As you've read the law just now, there are discrepancies in that law, similar to what we've encountered this year, which is that we shall hear a charter school application within 60 days. However, we also shall establish a deadline for a charter school application. I think that they're two different things, though. They're not the same thing when I'm interpreting this. Hearing an application is making sure that you put it on the agenda, voting it up or down. But if you've missed the deadline, so if you've already missed that deadline, it's a null and void thing. I mean, that's how I'm seeing this. So when we add, I agree, and I am concerned about the budgetary impacts, the transportation impacts, the staffing impacts in a already very strained system where we don't have enough educators, and we are constantly trying to recruit educators to our district. I'm very concerned about the impacts on students and the uncertainty it will bring to all that are a part of our school district to open a school mid-year. However, if that is truly what legal is advising us that we must do to follow the law, then we do that. But then I ask, where I think that it can get interpreted, where it gets a little bit squishy, if we do have to have the language around opening a school mid-year, so thank you within that school year, but just giving us that option to push it to the spring semester versus the fall semester. The language in here that states that the school board may deny an application that is not submitted sufficiently far in advance of operation for the proposed charter school to be reasonably anticipated to be successful. That's where it gets a little squishy to me. And so if we have an October 1st deadline, which I support, which gives us 10 months before this school year begins, is it possible that we have a deadline in the spring for establishment mid-year so that we're not in a position where somebody submits the last school day in June, which would still take us into the spring, into the summer, because regardless, even if they'd submit the last day of the school year, we'd have to hear it within 60 days. And their intention is to open in January. We could lean on a date, which would be very similar to October 1st, which would be a 10-month in advance of that January 1st, which, if I'm doing my math correctly, which would be February 1st? March 1st. Thank you, Loa. March 1st. So, I mean, I'm just looking at that. Could we add that? And then maybe that's what we ask legal.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. We'll go back to legal and see if that could be added.
That was a great suggestion. We're going to go to Miss Carol Hubbard and then Mr. Burgess.
Well, I like what she just suggested, and I think she kind of covered what I was going to say. Um, I do understand, like I'm following and tracking with the law of having the deadline and having the 60-day window to see to hear the charter. I understand that. And so I get it. It just if you're on this side of the line, you start the following year. If you're on this side of the line, you can start this year, or the following, whatever it is. Anyway, you start on that the next year. Is there anything in the statute that talks about January 1? I didn't hear that when you read it.
No.
So did that just come about in a like were you guys just deliberating on?
That was the recommended language from legal.
Do you know why? I mean, I guess I'm curious to know why they would suggest that we have a January 1 deadline. It seems to me that if you've submitted a timely application and it's a yes, then you start the following year. If it's not timely, then you start the second following year. Right? If it's still a yes, we've got a great charter opportunity, but not for 27 or not for 26, it'd be for 27 instead of January. And we can nix that whole thing unless there's some reason why they have that in there.
I think in what I heard from Dr. Meinert was that it potentially was to ensure that the charter school was getting approved for operations in that next year, but just after January 1 to provide for more time. But I think what I'm hearing is that we'll take this back to legal, and I'm hearing that we want to clean up the second paragraph because the September 1 date reference and October 1 might be a little bit confusing and could flow a little bit better. And that we're going to ask legal, do we have to have that January 1 date? Because potentially the board would prefer that we don't allow for a charter school to open at mid-year because it's very disruptive. So find out if that's something that we have to do. And then if that is something that we have to do, add in that spring deadline, March 1st, that you were discussing, so that there's a spring deadline if we're going to be going into that January date.
Okay. I think yes. Thank you. That's perfect.
Okay, we got Mr. Burgess and then Miss Julian.
Thank you. And my suggestion for that language cleanup would be just to move, just to say, by September 1st of each school year, district administration is directed to announce the deadline, and then so forth. But I appreciate Ms. Julian's idea, and I'd like to explore that. And I do think that in terms of starting mid-year, I share concerns about it potentially disrupting operations, but I just want to point out that the law kind of requires that one way or another. So, if we approved a charter school in March or whatever, and then it could, it would not be able to start that August, but it would still start the following school year, which is in line with the law. It just gives us those extra months, and the charter school itself, those extra months to prepare and truly be ready to run. So I would say that would potentially be less disruptive to district operations and budgets than forcing a start in August, even though it still is disruptive and the law is problematic because of that, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Miss Julian.
Yeah, thank you. In the spirit of collaboration, I think that when charter schools applications come forward with applications, and I mean we're seeing this right now. We're seeing this right now with even a group that wants to establish a charter school and that desire to work collaboratively. I mean, I think that having those dates in there also helps with that collaboration and removes some of the ambiguity. And hopefully, and of course, every single year budgets can shift, and maybe 5 years from now is a completely different story in regards to our the budget situation that we are in. So every year is different. But as we collaborate and the administration collaborates with charter applications, hopefully those conversations can be had from the administrative level, which is the full understanding from a charter application saying we want to start mid-year. Okay, well, let's talk about what that actually looks like to the whole. And hopefully those collaborative conversations can happen.
Thank you, Ms. Julian. Mr. Dorn?
Um, I'm thankful for this conversation, and I hope that this will come back to a work session because I think there are a lot of implications that before it comes to us in some version for first or second reading. Um, the January 1 date is extremely problematic, I think, for all parties. Um, and it's not good educational practice. Staff can't transfer. That cuts off staffing opportunities for the
Mr. Dorn, could you talk into your microphone?
Okay. Um, the the January 1 date is particularly problematic and disruptive to education. It's not good educational practice. And, we don't have transfers of staff in the middle, and so that cuts off a resource for a potential charter school. The movement of kids and the planning for our district to set up to staff for the year could leave us holding the bag in a lot of different ways. Arguably, it's better to start it within 2 months rather than putting it into the middle of the school year. I would ask that when we go back to get information, it may not only be limited to getting a legal opinion as to also getting a better understanding of what the intent of the legislature was and how DEED reads it. When they reference the following year, are they talking school year, calendar year? What are they talking? Or is that a clarification that perhaps legislature needs to take into account, especially as the task force meets, legislative task force on education meets this coming, the end of this month, and can take action if necessary to clarify the intents in early January. So I do think I want to voice in support of what people have said is we need better information right now. This is extremely confusing and perhaps detrimental to kids and in the educational process. The other piece of it, while we're talking about paragraph 2 going to paragraph 3, I do find that the perhaps in light of 2, the grounds for denial seem very open-ended and somewhat subjective, and that I'd really like to get a better understanding of what the impacts of denying a charter based on the budget or based on that it's not sufficiently far in advance, how that plays in an appeal, if that would be made. So I am concerned about that, and I don't have specific suggestions for paragraph 3, but I am concerned that we have a better conversation and understanding of what these things mean.
Go ahead, Dr. Minnick.
There's a couple of things there. I think the board should have a good discussion around paragraph 3. I think keeping it in general in nature for this policy would be advisable, but I think the board should have a conversation about that. School year is specific, and it's school year in the law, and then defined in our policy of what that means based on law. I do think the reason this policy is confusing is because the state statute is confusing. So If we take a history lesson back, the first language, and I can't remember what bill it was that first sentence. And as part of the compromise for HB 57, the second sentence in terms of the announcement of the year was added. And so even at that time, some superintendents expressed concern about the statute not necessarily being extremely clear, or the language actually could have been better. It didn't become better, so it became law. And now our attorneys are interpreting what that means for school districts. And so I share the concerns in terms of trying to open, and I shouldn't say the district trying to open a charter school mid-year in January. I wouldn't necessarily advise that, because you're right, contracts are already in place for teachers. It would be very hard to go out and hire teachers mid-year, to staff an entire charter school. There's all different kinds of other logistics that are easier done at the beginning of a school year than it is mid-year. But the law is pretty clear in terms of you have to allow it to open that next school year, but it doesn't set a date in terms of when it operates, or like when it actually officially opens. And so the board is defining that for the charter, that in that next school year, this is when when it could open after that October 1st deadline. So it gives everybody a little bit of room to figure it out and work through their processes. But all to say, I think the problem is with the statute, and we're trying to craft a policy that works within that framework and also gives the board flexibility in terms of, operating or helping operate a charter school for the district when those late applications come in.
Follow up.
Go ahead, Mr. Dorn.
Fully supportive of that, and why we need to have this now, this conversation now, rather than waiting down the line for a couple. And as you were speaking, what was going through my mind? Okay, they said we have to accept applications anytime, but we can set a date. If the lawyers are trying to figure out what it is, then we have an opportunity to guide the state law's application to benefit education, public education itself, on a broader basis. So not anticipating the what ifs as much as what we would like it to understand. And that's how we understand, and this is good for education. With that, a question: has the regulations come out yet from DEED?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so that becomes problematic in applying the law when we don't know how they interpret or imply the law. But if we get out there in front, which is the early conversation here, let's put it out there. That might help formulate what how those regulations might look, and really what some of the intentions, and particularly this might be a piece, as I said, to take to the Education Task Force and ask them to really address, because this is very complicated, and they have in the law said one thing and seemingly said the opposite. So it's a good opportunity. It's timely for us to get and push for better clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Dorn. Any further questions on this policy from Mrs. Julian?
Thank you. I have two questions, and then I'd like to speak to a conversation, President Burnett, if we can, about that third paragraph. But the first two questions are relatively quick. What is our legally, now that House Bill 57 passed and it became law, what is our timeline for when we need to have a new policy in place by?
As soon as possible.
Okay. So in regards to that, we can always review a policy again. We know that we're out in front of us. I would even though we still have to go one reading and then a second reading before we vote, I would be more apt to supporting us moving forward with this more quickly to follow that law and to comply with the new law. Even if that means that as things change, we might need to adjust things a little and as we get more guidance. Okay, the second question that I had was, is this policy 935.1, did we also receive AASB recommendations on this specific policy, or was it just the first policy that we looked at tonight?
So AASB put out a new Article 10, which is actually reformatted. AASB had one policy, 6181,
Yep.
and we have like 7. And so we had done a lot of work with charter schools to kind of work that into that one policy, 6181. Well, this summer, ASB put out a whole new Article 10, which is like 10 policies. So they did a lot of work to expand the language. I wouldn't say that it's a whole lot of new procedural stuff to us or to anybody. It's all statute that's being put front and center in policy. I would have to look back to, I did look at the language they added because of House Bill 57, and I would say that it was very minimal. It wasn't anything that conflicted with what we got from legal. It was just a very short regurgitation of what was in House Bill 57, but I would have to look back at it because I haven't.
Okay, thank you. And can I introduce the thing that I wanted to?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I, for one of the primary responsibilities of a school board is the fiduciary health and stability of an entire district. And so I appreciate us having this language in here because it has come up in conversations. Can an application be denied on potential negative impacts to the district's budget writ large? And I think that it's incredibly important that we have this language in here. So I appreciate this language being more open-ended. And of course, I lean back on, this is a policy. This is a policy that guides community groups, that guides groups that want to establish charter schools, and gives them guardrails. It gives them dates. It gives them an understanding of what they need to kind of look for. It points to, our extensive policies. It also points to the state statute. These guardrails, letting somebody know to think about broader than just the budget that they're bringing to us, to look at us as a whole, I think, again, leans back on what I'm hoping that we get to here, which is a collaborative approach to working with these groups, which is, I know what the district is wanting to do. I know that's what we've been working towards. And really that's how I would say all of the charter schools that are established right now have come to be, is through a collaborative process, working with the district year after year to fine-tune an application that then the administration feels confident that they could put towards the board, versus fast-tracking something that might not be ready. And we just saw that happen with the with the pull of an application. So I think that I like having the dates in here. I don't love a mid-year start, but if that's the law, we have to follow it. I would like us to have 2 then deadlines, one in the fall and one in the spring, that helps put more guardrails around what would be financially viable. If we do that in the spring, it also gives that board an opportunity to know that that is something that they might have to budget for. And we even had that conversation as a board this year. So I really support us keeping that language in around the district budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Julian. Anything further? Mr. Dorn?
Um, as the conversation goes on, one of the things that it strikes me is one, since January 1 is not part of the law or any of the conversation that I know of around the compromise, um, there's no presumption that delaying the start beyond the start of the school year to have a mid-year opening is in any way in the minds of the legislature or of the law. And so I think we're adding something to the law that is not there. The other piece, when I look at the that last paragraph, the third paragraph, I think Ms. Julian brings up some really good points about where bringing forward considerations of budget, et cetera. I would suggest that we relook at, when we relook at this, I don't think it's anywhere near ready for us to come to a first reading. There are too many major issues and stuff within it. But looking at that last part is, we, rather than talking about denials of it, but these are factors that will be considered. You know, I think that when we consider an application and those applying for it should be ready to know that budgetary considerations are there. There are, you know, timeliness is there. And I would say that we have time to do a better job on crafting this policy, even though it may be, the end result may be somewhat short-term because we don't have state regulations and we probably may not have them for months or years. But or may never get any. We have laws out there that they've never done regulation for. But right now, I would say we are in keeping with state law. If we get an application at this point prior to our current policy is October 1, we will be addressing that within 60 days. It's timely for us to factor it into our budget if that's their other factors, you know, of their application plan, blah, 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 all of those things. It's if we get an application after that date that we then get a little bit more, I'm going to use the wonky in figuring out how that law plays and when that would go into effect. There's nothing right now in any indication that we've ever had from the state in establishing a charter school that budget impacts are a deciding factor necessarily. So by state law, we could be in a problematic. So I'd say let's take the time to do this as well as we can. And because there are major questions, we do have that time. We have a couple of months before, and if this would become a bigger issue. And we do have to solve it. I'm not saying just put it in our back pocket and ignore it. I think we need to proactively move forward. We can come up with something that might craft and actually help other districts and those who might apply so that they're not caught. I think it's that collaboration piece that you're really talking about and saying, you know, how do we do that?
Thank you, Mr. Doran. Ms. Maple.
I know the mid-year date. I hear all of the apprehension of having a policy that talks about that mid-year date, but as I'm reading it, I'm seeing that as us making sure that we are following the law, without setting ourselves up to have our hand forced on something we can't follow through on. So while it wouldn't be ideal, you know, ordinarily to open a school January 1st, I think the alternative could potentially set us up to have to scramble to do something. So I see that, even though that wouldn't be ideal, I see it as almost a protective factor. And I imagine that's probably where that came from. I don't know. I just wanted to acknowledge that while obviously a middle of the school year start date has problematic implications, I think that that's a way of making sure we're following the law as it's now written without setting ourselves up for disaster. So,
Mr. Burgess.
Thank you. Yeah, that's well put, Ms. Maple. There's a few things that were discussed that I was going to try to hit on here, but let's see if I can hit the important ones. I do, to Ms. Doolean's point about the collaborative process, I do think that this, the way it's crafted, it helps. It helps people understand our expectations. It helps to outline, a bit about, why we might make a decision in paragraph 3 or might deny something. I would be supportive of Mr. Doran's idea of changing the language there to say factors that will be considered rather than school board may deny. I'm okay with it either way, honestly, but I do think that if we change it to factors we consider, there's probably more factors we'd want to add. So that might make the added challenge of lengthening the policy in general. I'm good either way, but I understand the intent there behind that change, and I don't disagree. I do wonder too, if Mr. Doran had mentioned staffing issues, moving teachers or education professionals mid-year, and I'm not sure that starting earlier actually solves that in all cases, because we still might be, depending on when an application is submitted, we still might be past that staffing assignments, I think, if I have the timelines correct in my head. So the other thing I wanted to hit on is that I think I don't see a problem with us outlining the January 1st date. Its absence in law doesn't mean that we can't add it to policy. That's really our job when there's a law, is to design a policy that is in line with that law and also serves our best interests. So I think that that's what this is trying to do, and I don't understand why we wouldn't be able to add that. If that's not what the legislature intended, then they can go back and clean up their law a little bit, and then we'll come back to this policy. I think that's all I had to say for now.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Thank you. The idea about the collaboration, it implies that we have a good working relationship with a charter, with a school board, or with an administration from a school and the district administration that want to work together and collaborate. And I think that's amazing. And I think we need to give come at this with the idea that the people who might step forward and bring a charter to us are going to understand, because of the law, what they're facing. And so if they understand that we have teacher contracts completed, that these things are already in place, they must have a plan. And so I think this is, as I'm listening, if the law says we have to start them the following year, I like the idea of having a date for sure, So the January, the start of, would that be technically second semester? Who's elementary? Yes. Okay. So then it would be the second semester. Okay. So it seems like that would be prudent on our part to make a January 1st deadline, since the law says they have to start the following year. So I'm good with that. And I actually really like the way that it's written. Now that we've sort of mulched it and processed it, I'm kind of coming back to it going, it's pretty good like it is. I think we need to give really the charter applicants maybe more credit that they are going to understand what the deadlines are, so that if they walk into our meeting in February, they understand, or if they come in November, whatever it is, they already get it and they already know what they're up against. And if that's what they want to do, I mean, I would like them to succeed, and I would want to do everything that we can do to help them succeed. However, if this is the law and we're just giving the bumpers, I say let them go and let them apply and do what they want to do and bring it on. Let's go, because this is what this is what the people are asking for. They're asking for choice in education. They're asking for charters. It's what the governor wants. It's what seems to be what people want to go. And if they want to start in January, okay. I mean, if they're going to do that and they understand the implications, they must have a plan. And so we have to trust that their plan must be a pretty darn good one.
Thank you, Miss Carol Hubbard. Okay, so we're starting to spiral out a little bit on this one issue with this policy. So if we have something new, we still have a whole Article 6 to get to. I know that Miss Dillard has taken a lot of notes and has a lot of direction from the board for these two charter school policies. And so I'd really like for the board to move on and get to Article 6. So if we don't have anything new, I would like to have us move on. Mrs. Julian, did you have something new? Okay.
I do. Would it be possible, and I think we would need to verify this with legal, would it be possible in the policy to state the two different deadlines, however, also make a statement that it is preferable for students and families and staff and everything that the October 1st deadline is followed for an anticipated opening of the beginning of a full school year. And then I think that also provides some guardrails and guidance to folks that this is the preference of the school district, that we plan for these things wholly within a budget. WHOL, yes, but wholly within a budget versus opening a budget mid-year and then adjusting and making adjustments for staffing changes and student changes and transfers and everything midway through a school year. So if there is a possibility that legal says, yes, that's possible to list two, but then say that there is a preference for or there's a strong recommendation that the October 1st deadline is followed to provide, stability. I would hope that we could add something like that, since we're going to have two deadlines. Because what I don't want is that we might have two deadlines in here because we need to follow the law. And then it's like, oh, well, both are equally great. No, the one that's before a school year, October 1st, would be the preference.
Can I speak to that?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Dr. Minor.
I actually really like that recommendation, and that's exactly what administration would do if we were collaborating with a potential charter. I do want to speak to the word collaboration because I think it's come up multiple times tonight, and I want to clarify that if an application is submitted, then the board must act within 60 days on that charter application. And so that limits the amount of actual collaboration that can be had with a charter group. Now, in the past, for all of the charters that exist within the district, we've received intents to open charters, and then we've had true collaboration in terms of going back and forth and giving recommendations like Ms. Julian said, like, hey, this is what it says, but really to have a strong start, you should probably write your charter in such a way because you need to understand the collective bargaining agreements we have, the budgeting cycle, the curriculum procurement process, purchasing furniture, all of these complex things that go into starting a charter school. And so my administration is definitely willing to collaborate with potential charter groups, but that does not happen within a 60-day time frame. If it's within a 60-day time frame, my administration will be doing everything they can to read 100 to 200 page application, ensuring that we understand that application so then I can give a solid recommendation to the Board of Education. So the collaboration at that point in time is pretty limited. We'll let you know, we'll let groups know where there might be some issues or areas to strengthen, but it won't be that back and forth where a substantial charter application, could be created and I could give a very solid recommendation to the board based on that collaboration.
Thank you, Dr. Minor. Mr. Dorn?
I think it's also important when we talk about collaboration, especially by the time an application comes, that the district that application is there. That application is there. It's not a matter of the district helping to make it a stronger application. That conversation should be part of the intents or the idea even before the intent that we're thinking about. And we've had groups over the years who have spent extensive time over a couple of years even talking about the idea before they did the intent and then did the final application. But that it's not the administration's role to make sure that application successfully is acted upon by the board, whatever that success is. While we're in charter schools and just because I know we want to go beyond that, is just when you look at 935.23, I think we can do better in terms of we say that it's described in policy, administrative regulations, state law, and rather than give that specific in the paragraph there, because I just looked up the law and I think you referenced it primarily because of termination conversation, which is one small part of it, as you mentioned, but it's already referenced in the cross references above. And so we've got that. They know what law to go to if they want to. And no matter what the contract has to meet state law, that one as well as other aspects of just contract law. So just a suggestion before we leave that one completely.
Thank you, Mr. Dorn. Would there be anything new regarding charter schools before we move on? Seeing nothing at this time, Ms. Dillard, we will be moving on into Article 6.
Yay. Right, so Article 6, instruction. This article, once adopted, will replace almost all of our Chapter 9 and Chapter 8 policies. I think we should just jump in. I have a lot of notes on any significant procedural changes for us, which isn't actually a lot, but I've made notes on the ones that I want to say something about. And then we have quite a few new policies to our district. So I think we should just maybe start at the beginning and see if we have comments on each one.
Sounds good.
Okay. So we'll start with 6,000, concepts and roles.
Board members take a couple seconds to read it, and then if you have questions, I'm looking for hands. Ms. Maple.
I was just going to ask, reading the room, if we've all had a chance to look at it, could we have Ms. Dillard share with us where there's been significant changes, and if we have other questions, we can pop in, or?
Yeah, sorry, I guess I could have led with that. I don't have any significant changes to this policy. It aligns with our 900 curriculum and instructional philosophy, which is a pretty short policy. We brought over our language as far as the introduction goes and added the new mission statement, but there's nothing substantive changed to this policy.
Mr. Dorn.
Okay. Fair warning, I have 4 pages of notes. There are some that I have,
Mr. Doran.
but it's, so just fair warning. But in this one, I would suggest in that first sentence that we consider dropping as a community, that phrase, because it's the school board is in this one. And I appreciate the fact that it brought in the some of the wording from the strategic plan, which does, as a community, references that this is board policy and it's the board that creates the supportive piece here. So an observation with that. For readability, I would suggest that the other paragraphs primarily be done as bullets. Did have a question to get an understanding of towards the bottom of that first page, the district shall provide comparable educational opportunities for all students. What the meaning of comparable is, or the intent of that. Is it equitable? What do we mean by comparable?
We'll give you a definition if you talk into your microphone.
I would.
You're on. I'm going to move it to this side. Loa, keep me in line.
Mr. Dorn, I would look at the box note directly above that because I think that's what that sentence is flowing from. So ensuring that all schools have equivalent provision of staff, curriculum materials, and instructional supplies.
Right. So is that box staying there? I understood that we were dropping those notations because they're just from ASB as
Great
things to
question.
think about.
I think that for the purpose of work session, I wanted to keep the notes in if
Right.
they were helpful to the discussion. But if we don't want to leave them in for our final product, then we can take them out. But for at least discussion point, I left most of them in.
Okay. All right. Okay. And then the other comment, thank you. The other comment that I had is under definitions, that curriculum in the district, second sentence of the first paragraph there, curriculum in the district is based upon adopted, we have state and national content area standards. I would suggest that we include the word district because we have standards that vary sometimes because it applies very much to our locale and things of that sort. So when we do curriculum reviews, my experience has been that we're looking not only at those standards, but what makes sense for our kids. And located here in Fairbanks, in Alaska, or so. And we're not limited to state or national. And I'm assuming that the national content standards, I'm sorry, through the chair, and might be to curriculum, is since we don't have national standards, these are contents from the various professional associations. Am I correct?
Yes, I would say some of the national, like science standards, those are like national organizations. And then we have the state standards also. So I would say yes to both of those things.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Mr. Doran. Is there any more questions regarding this first 6,000 concepts and roles? Seeing none, we can move on to the next one.
I guess I would just ask for some direction as far as board overall, how you feel about the mission statement being in there as a whole statement, because our original policy had our mission statement, and so it was just updated here to be our new mission statement, which does have that as a community in it.
Mr. Burgess?
I appreciate that question, and I do think echoing our strategic plan is fine here. I do, the strategic plan does sunset eventually, so I don't know if we would change that again if that changes in the strategic plan, but I would say that I agree with Mr. Doran's comments that having that as a community it's awkward here, but I would suggest that we could keep the piece about community, but to just rephrase it, so instead of as a community, we work with the community, something along those lines. So the school board is committed to working with the community to create supportive learning environments where all students thrive. We could even say in accordance with a strategic plan or something. I don't know, but maybe not. but I think keeping that in there because it speaks to the strategic plan, but rephrasing so it works better, I think would be my suggestion.
I like that suggestion, Mr. Burgess.
And then also, I don't know if it needs to be said, but that note in the box, because that came up too. I would agree that we can get rid of that box, but if we do that, we should move some of that language into text, and probably just cite the code in policy language.
Mrs. Julian?
Thank you. That's a good question. Do we support having the mission statement and other things that have a timestamp on them in policy? And I would say yes and no, because no, it creates more work for future boards down the road to maintain updated policies that are in accordance with updated mission statements and strategic plans. However, it's also incredibly important that a strategic plan and a mission isn't just on your shelf, on the wall, on a document. It's incredibly important to integrate that into your policies, and that creates transparency. So I think that the way that it's written and including it, understanding that future boards, when future boards adjust those things, that there will need to be a revision on policy in certain areas. So bookmarking them in a way, I think would be helpful. So I hope that doesn't really answer the question, but I do think it's a way to build those pillars into the what we are doing as a district and how we are implementing policies and procedures within a whole. And then to the notes statement, I actually like the notes because it gives history and it allows nerds like me an opportunity to go, ooh, but also I understand that we don't need to muddle this anymore. So I support removing them reluctantly.
One more, Mrs. Julian?
I did, and then I wondered if Mr. Dorn brought coffee tonight for along with your 4 pages of text. That was just.
I never drink coffee, but I appreciate you doing. It is tea, though.
Okay, we'll take it.
I am
We'll take it.
prepared.
Okay.
Anything?
I should have brought it for everybody. I am sorry.
Okay, anything further on BP 6000 concepts and roles? Mr. Doran?
I appreciate and like the rewording that Mr. Burgess suggested. I'd be supportive of that. The thing is, also, this is not in here as the mission statement, that first sentence. It's in here, it happens to coincide, and it's good generic wording, so it references to curriculum. I don't think it needs to be something that automatically has to change if we change other things. Um, I did have a question just when we talk about curriculum broadly. Um, I'm assuming we're not only talking about academic, but the broader curriculum that we provide within our schools, which includes, so many of our intercurriculars and um, um, things that teachers and kids bring, families bring to our school. It's a broader sense of curriculum as well as the academic. I mean, this addresses a lot of the academic um, materials thing and our standards, our goals. But I'm seeing it as more broadly, or am I wrong on that?
I'm gonna. So in my world, when we say curriculum, we mean what are you going to teach and how are you going to teach it? Which align with the standards that you mentioned earlier. If you're asking if there's something beyond broader than that, I would say I think it depends on what we're looking at in each specific context that we would look at.
Great, thank you.
And can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Minor.
And I think to your question, this is an opener for the entire article. And so, as you'll see later on in the article, we do talk about extracurricular, co-curricular activities. There's a new sportsmanship policy that I'm recommending we adopt. And it goes in a lot of different facets in terms of the student experience in schools beyond just, the academic standards that we're talking about in this first policy.
Great, thank you, and I appreciate that. That's what I was hoping.
Anything further or any more direction for Ms. Dillard on this first portion? Seeing none, Ms. Dillard, we will move on to parent involvement.
Thank you. So this is a policy that some of you are probably familiar with because you worked on it in the last year or two. It was policy 126, parent involvement with education. And so that was a requirement from a statute change. And we plugged in our policy 126. AASB's was pretty similar. I would add that if you look down to the bottom of the first page of that policy, you'll see an asterisk by class. And we did add a definition of what we mean by class. So there's no confusion about, you can't, if you're in high school, you can't just not take a math class that's a graduation requirement. So that we added that definition there. And then we also added our policy 124, which is parent involvement in decision making. And then at the very end, we added parent guardian involvement in class assignment. Admittedly, it's a little bit, it doesn't flow 100% with this policy, but it was the best place for it. And it was a policy that we wanted to keep. So that's the parent guardian involvement in class assignment at the end.
Thank you, Ms. Dillard. Just for a little history on the parent involvement policy, the board had also received a letter from the Attorney General, which highly encouraged us to have this in place. So this is one of those policies that is something we must have per law. Mrs. Julian.
No, thank you. I had a question about the way that this BP 6020 is titled parent involvement. However, the policy really, when I'm reading this, is about parental rights. And maybe I'm misinterpreting it. When I'm thinking from a parent or guardian, and I appreciate also using parent or guardian because what we're talking about, who has the legal authority to make these types of decisions, and that's the parent or guardian. And I'm please correct me if that's not a correct understanding. Because at first I thought, I want to lean into family involvement and parent involvement and helping students achieve, learn to read and all the things. But this is really, when I'm reading this, is really about what rights those parents or guardians have to, in a sense, opt out So if I was a parent or a guardian looking for that language in our policies, I might not know that it's here. Is this the way that AASB kind of identifies this section as using the words parent involvement, or is there an alternative title?
This is the title from ASB, and I will also add that we will see when we get to Article 5 of Family Engagement Policy that is much more robust on overall engaging with between school and home. So you're right, this is very much about the parental rights piece, but this is the title that came with ASB, and we have changed titles. So if there's a suggestion for a different title, we can certainly do that.
So if I may, just to go back to a little history, this was done on my first year on the board. The name of this policy was Parental Rights in Education. And we had a couple of board members at that time who were not happy with that title being Parental Rights in Education. And so this was the title that the board had moved it to. And so that was something that was done 3 years ago now. Just a little history there on that. Mr. Burgess?
Thank you. One weird thing I noticed here on page 3, second to last paragraph. Well, actually, it shows up in several places now that I'm looking at it. The word class with an asterisk after it. And then there's a footnote basically at the beginning of page 4. It says class refers to a unit, lesson, or assignment, not a full-length course. But then at the bottom, there's parent or guardian involvement in class assignment. And class would seem there to mean the classroom, or teacher, class as commonly defined. And so I think that's confusing. I also think that when people use the word class, they typically mean the particular semester-long or year-long course, or in the case of elementary school, a teacher's classroom. And so I would suggest that if we do want class to mean unit, lesson, or assignment, not a full-length course, that we just take all of those instances of class that are asterisked and replace it with unit, lesson, or assignment.
I'd be in favor of that. Thank you for that recommendation, Mr. Burgess.
Sorry, it was a little lengthy, but
No, it's a good one, though. Any other suggestions, questions, comments? Mr. Dorn?
That was an area of concern, but I read it differently than you did, and I'm glad you brought it to the fore, because in that, otherwise I would have said that parent involvement in class assignment. I was thinking the assignment in homework or active work, whatever that is, and which should not then go to the principal. It should go, or the building administrator should go to the teacher. But if we clarify that, clean that up, that would be good. What I would suggest with this is, and I like parent and guardian involvement, and it should be parent/guardian involvement thing in the title, is it's proactive and it's positive, but I would strongly suggest that we start with the section, actually, I like the one just above it, the section that's parent guardian involvement in decision-making, that paragraph be moved up to the front, and that the one preceding that be the main opening one. Teachers, parents, guardians can better understand and meet student needs if they work together, et cetera. And because that's really the essence of what this is. And then the
Hold on,
latter
Mr.
part
Dorn. Did you capture that, Ms. Dillard?
I'm following, but let me just take this opportunity opportunity to make sure that I'm following. So I'm hearing you say that you want the parent guardian, and the screen's probably a little bit hard for you to see, but I am making edits behind you if you want to look up there. Move the parent guardian involvement in decision making, move that to the top, but then add the paragraph before it, the teacher and parent guardians can better understand, and make that part of that paragraph under.
Yeah, I would actually, that one, that teachers and parents can better, that one, I would make the first paragraph.
Okay, just start,
Actually,
that's the
because I
starter.
think it addresses what we, the fact that parent involvement, parent guardian involvement really makes a difference. And when we work together, that makes the difference for kids. And then, I don't know that we need the bold-facing line there, but that paragraph goes on a little bit further with that. And that the, it sounds like the very last paragraph where you might be deleting, because that is a different type of class assignment.
I made a note to potentially make it classroom assignment. I think in talking with, getting feedback from administrators, this is something, at least at the elementary level, is referenced in policy fairly regularly. So it's still, I think it still fits with this policy.
Okay, all right, that would still fit under there, okay. That may, then maybe that should also be there. And the very last part is, listing out that if you have a problem or you have a concern for your child, it's not necessarily a problem. There may be a situation that you do have these rights. And if I remember correctly, the listing 1 to 5 is pretty much exactly as it comes out of state law. Right. So I would have readjusted some of them a little bit, but especially 5 going to be number 1. And if we can do that, I would suggest that. Again, it's a more positive type of thing. And then if you do have an objection or a concern, but I do think we pretty much copied that out of state law. And so, but I do think that should be after the proactive parent involvement and participation is a good thing, and that's what we want.
Thank you, Mr. Doran. Dr. Minor.
Yeah, I did want to, I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Doran, that it is copied exactly out of state law. I don't know that it matters if, we feel like we want to reshuffle 1 through 5. That doesn't make any difference because they're not building on each other. So I kind of like that of rearranging them to fit our needs. I would caution the board against getting rid of the word class, though, because that is in statute and that's why it's defined here. And so if we start to change that terminology, then it could change the interpretation of what the law is and what the policy is here locally. So it actually does say, those exact words, activity, class, or program in state statute.
Mr. Beam.
Yes, actually, this was a conversation that we had with my folks, and we were quite concerned about the word class itself, because some people could interpret that as, I can opt out of Algebra 1 because that's a class. Because some people call that a class, and that's what we wanted to stay away from. I really did like your suggestion because that really clarified it. But if we do have to stick with the word class because that's in there, I really would encourage us to have something that makes sure that people can't see that word class and think that they can opt out of an entire course.
Thank you, Mr. Beam. Mrs. Julian.
Okay, I'll speak to that first. My recommendation would be, or my idea that I'm throwing out there is that instead of the asterisks, we instead write class, comma, as defined as, and we say that after every single time, because if we have an asterisk, people, it just make it so that it's very clear what we are talking about as defined by state law as blah, 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 blah. And that also, I think, will help future boards understand why we are using that word. Then my second recommendation is that, I really like Mr. Doran's comments about rearranging and starting with the positive. I'm thinking about the parent or guardian that's looking for this type of guidance in our policies of what to do if they want to opt out, or what to do if they want to, what are kind of the decision making processes that they can participate in. I like the word involvement. I think that if I was going to make a recommendation on changing the name of this, and thank you also for the history, President Burnett, I would recommend that we change the overall title of this to what's already stated there, where we're going to pop it up to parent/guardian, because then that shows everybody parent/guardian involvement in decision making. Instead of having that be a subheader, just bring that as the entire title header, the overall header. I don't think that it implies a negative or a positive. It just shows people where this type of information can be found. And then we lead with the positive that Mr. Doran popped up to the top. And then we go into more of the details. But from a user perspective of somebody who might be looking for this, just having parent involvement seems a little bit too much like, and I'm sorry, Ms. Dillard, the other more robust, what I was thinking it was. Family engagement, yeah. So this having like parent/guardian speaks to all. Involvement is still there in decision making. I think clearly identifies what this is.
Thank you, Mrs. Julian. Mr. Doran, I've got you in the queue, but we are going to take a brief 5-minute recess, and then we'll come back with a question from you.
are you doing tomorrow morning? Roll. Come on.
All right, we ready to get back into policy work, going back into our parent involvement policy. And we ended with Mr. Dorn and his question.
Okay. Hopefully a solution. That last section, parent guardian involvement in class assignment, which is causing some confusion. Instead of class assignment, and perhaps others who've been around as principals here in the district, I want to say the phrase that has been commonly used is academic placement, which is what grade they go into, their courses. I mean, those types of their standing. And this really describes that. But I think we have, in other places or at other times, we have referenced the principal makes the final decision on academic placement. So that might avoid that confusion. And at one point in my mind, I was thinking that should just be taken out of here. But I like the suggestion in parent guardian involvement in decision-making. And in essence, that maybe should be one of the first things, because that happens before you even get to an assignment in class or activity. So that's my thinking on it, and put that in the hopper. And I'm happy with the administration playing around with that and saying rather than hammering that out tonight. But I think that would help too. And if there's a different phrase than academic placement, that's fine. But I think we can really make a distinction between what you go to the administrator for versus working with the teacher on.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Dorn. Any other questions from board members regarding this portion of the policy? Seeing none at the moment, okay. Then are we ready to move into 6111 school calendar? Okay, Mrs. Dillard.
No major notes on this one. This aligns with our section on school calendar term, which is policy 941 through 941.2.
Anything from the board? Seeing nothing, okay, we will move into the next one, 6112 school day. Mrs. Dillard?
School day is also from our policy. No changes to anything that we had.
Mr. Dorn?
Okay. I would suggest the third paragraph, that we delete it, or at least describe what we do as a district. This is meeting basically the state minimums type of thing. It's not what we do, and is not necessary in actuality.
Dr. Minor?
I would agree. I wonder if that's historical language when, the school district was working through kindergarten or full day kindergarten or all those transitions. But I think at this point in time, it doesn't need to be there because we're going to follow state law in terms of what the school day is.
All right. And we no longer have part-time. I mean, that's when I think it is historical, basically, because we had half-time students or, anyway. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Dorn. Ms. LaPlante?
My one thought is that we sometimes do have kindergarten students who find the whole day difficult, and we do, on very case-by-case basis, allow individual students to have a shorter day until they can build up stamina. I don't know if we need anything to give them that protection, or if that's just something that we can accommodate because we do student support plans all the time. need this in there to support that, this would be the time to speak up. Otherwise, it's not necessary.
I would think that that would just be something that falls in line with student support and
I would agree because it falls under that umbrella that we're still going to follow state law.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Burgess?
Would that, I mean, could that be an AR too? Would we even need it in policy?
It definitely could be if we felt the need to further clarify that.
That was it.
Mrs. Julian, sorry, I skipped you and I apologize. You go ahead.
No, that's okay. I have a question because of the note. And I know that we are going to strike those when we publish this. However, I'm very curious as I'm reading this that state law allows a school board to approve Saturday as a day in session. I'm very curious about that.
Yes, it does. And there's
It absolutely does.
there are some school districts, specifically rural school districts, that
do.
will have some Saturday schools so that the school year isn't stretched out throughout the calendar. And some school districts also put inclement weather days on Saturdays as well.
Can I ask though how that relates to union contracts and maybe we can just table my questions for our future conversation because I'm very curious about that. And I'm not going to say that I'm like excited. I'm just curious about that policy.
Morgan over here starting Saturday school rumors.
No, I want to state right now that I am not supportive of having school on Saturday. And I will state that again. I am not supportive of that. However, I'm very curious that that is in state law. Okay, thank you.
It is very, very curious for sure. Thank you, Mrs. Julian. Anything further on school day? All right, seeing nothing, we will be moving on and we will go into 6114 crisis response plan when you are ready, Ms. Dillard.
Okay, so this policy is going to have a very, very, very big administrative regulation. So I just want to put that out there because if you feel like some of the procedural things you'd be questioning when you look at this policy, it's because there's a lot that goes into crisis response planning, and that will be an administrative regulation. The second paragraph is essentially what we had in policy 730 or have in policy 730. And the first paragraph and the last paragraph about American Red Cross is from Alaska Association of School Board language.
Thank you, Ms. Dillard. Questions from the board? Mr. Doran.
I don't have a problem with the policy per se. I have a question in terms of why it's in this section. It would seem to me that it actually would fit in a different section than in our curriculum and instructional section.
Well, this is where ASB put it. I guess I would say with like our chapters, like chapter 8, which is not related to this, but technology, ASB doesn't even have a technology, so we're going to see technology things related to instruction in Article 6. And I want to almost say that 7, yeah, we have chapter 7, which is not support services non-instructional, and that's where our emergency response stuff was, and they don't have, ASB doesn't have, they just have instruction. So beyond that, I guess I don't know.
If I may interject, would a possible, just looking at the policy itself, if you look at that last paragraph where it says the school board shall grant the use of school buildings, grounds, and equipment to public agencies, yada, yada, yada. Would that possibly be why it's in this portion? Because it's something that the board has to act on in this type of situation?
Well, I mean, the crisis response plan is the responsibility of every school. So that kind of goes into taking care of the students. I mean, it's going to be the ALICE protocols. It's going to be bomb threats, all of that. So I don't know that there would be a better place for it because we have students. I don't think it would really go in the student section. We have a facilities section, and this touches on facilities, but it's more about requirements of having a district level requirement for crisis response plan, and then every program in school has to have one. So
Mr. Dorn?
So you said it would it has been in our 700s, which are transferring to, is they still saying, I don't remember offhand what section that is.
Chapter 7 is support services, non-instructional, and so they have landed in a couple of different places. Some of those policies went to Article 3, which is business non-instructional. Some of it fell into, so it kind of went in a few different places.
All right. And I don't want to belabor tonight on it, but I do think we should consider putting it in a more appropriate area than, because it is broader than just curriculum. And I do think that, again, ASB is a model. It is not de facto where it is. So we move things around. And I think it's better placed in another section. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mr. Doran. Mr. Burgess?
Thanks. I would agree that this seems a little awkward in this location. But another concern I have with that same paragraph is that it says that the use of the phrase, the school board shall grant the use. Does that mean that we should be taking specific action as a board? Or does that use of shall mean that we're just
We just do.
automatically doing like
Yeah.
because I would prefer not to have to take action
And it just be something we do.
and it just just be known that the administration can take those steps working with those agencies in question.
Dr. Minor?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a delegated authority there through the superintendent, and that's the way I read it.
Perfect.
Works for me. Thanks.
Yeah, same. Further questions on crisis response plan? Seeing none at this time, we will move on into 6115, ceremonies and observances. Ms. Dillard?
Okay, so this policy pulls in our 162, which was lowering the flag. 290.1 school holidays, which was the only remaining Chapter 2 policy that we have online. And so this is looking through it, mostly our language, no substantive changes to the policy.
Thank you, Ms. Dillard. Questions from the board? Mr. Dorn?
I was suggesting under that section, lowering the flag in commemoration, that the way I would do it is remove or delete that first phrase when displayed at half-staff, because the same recognition by the school board of the flag is whether it's at full staff or half-staff. And then at the last sentence in that paragraph, it addresses specifically when the flag goes to half-staff. So I think it's redundant and distracting, the first.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dorn. Anything further from other board members? Mr. Burgess?
I'm looking at the first paragraph under patriotic expression, and the last half of the last sentence there. I'm not sure that it's appropriate for us to be encouraging people to participate in patriotic expression, even if it is the Pledge of Allegiance. People have the right to participate one way or another, or to not, to participate or to not participate. And I don't think it's our role to encourage people to pledge their allegiance to a flag.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess.
And to be clear, I think the issue there is freedom of speech and compelled speech. I don't think I think that this could be viewed as compelling someone to speak, or even I know the word is encourage, but I don't know that it's something that we really need to weigh in on.
So I have a couple of you in the queue, but we're gonna go to Miss Maple first and then Mrs. Julian.
Two things. I agree with Mr. Burgess, and I think that just removing the after the comma, because it's state law, so we're doing this where it's recited in schools. But I do agree that the second half of the sentence just feels unnecessary. And with that said, earlier we talked about removing the notes, and Miss Julian acknowledged that it's really helpful as we're looking through this to have the notes. And I know that there seemed to be agreement earlier that we should remove those when we publish that, like when this actually goes public, and I disagree. Like this one in particular, it is really helpful to have that note there, especially if somebody is reading this and thinking exactly what Mr. Burgess just said, that it sounds like compelled speech or anything else in here that somebody might take issue with, that having these notes, it's really helpful for us as we're writing and editing policy, and I think it's just as helpful for the public when they're reading policy. So just sharing that thought.
Thank you, Miss Maple. I'm gonna throw myself in. And I think that I actually agree with Miss Maple that this would be one of the policies where we maybe leave the note in. But I would highly discourage us from removing the last sentence because I don't see encouraging as a compelled language or a forceful language. I find it to be that we just encourage it. But as the note says, that if you're not comfortable doing so, if it's against your beliefs or your values or anything like that, that you just maintain a respectful silence. And I truly don't find anything to be wrong with that. Again, that's just speaking my own opinion. We'll go to Miss Dillard and then we have Mrs. Julian.
I just wanted to add real quick that in that policy 5145.2, freedom of speech and expression, it explicitly states that students can refrain from the pledge. So just so that you're aware that that is in that policy.
Thank you, Miss Dillard. Mrs. Julian.
Thank you. I think the word that is sticking with me is encourages, because it gets sticky when it's in policy. Because what does it actually mean? I'm actually reflecting back earlier this year when we were encouraged to do something, and we were told that is not a legal word, encourage. So policy to me is our governance document, and patriotic expression. I want to state that I'm glad that we have this in here. But I think that we could just have the school board encouraging activities that instill pride in our country, state, and borough and town, period. Because that goes beyond what we have here. But then we can say something like school buildings will display the flags of the United States and Alaska, period. The Pledge of Allegiance shall be recited daily in schools, period. And then I think it's important to also state a person/student is permitted to recite the salute to the flag or maintain a respectful silence. So then you're grabbing the law, and we're not adding a squishy word. It's not to say that I don't support that, but it's just a squishy word that allows for interpretation.
Thank you, Mrs. Julian. We'll go to Mr. Dorn. Oh, Mr. Dorn, if you don't mind, Miss Carol Hubbard jumped in. He has a lot of questions in, so we'll let you go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm still addressing this one, so I wanted this as I'm just on topic here. The the box that is the law that says, or to remain or maintain a respectful silence. I think that's sufficient. Um, in my opinion, I would like to see us say the Pledge of Allegiance shall be recited daily in schools, period, and leave the second half off. That's fine. Um, I, if it's going to be, if it has the ability to be misinterpreted as coercion or indoctrination or some whatever, I don't know, then maybe we should leave it off. But if the law says that it must be recited, we better state that it will be recited and then stop. And that's just the bottom line, how you feel about it, and we don't have to get into the mushy.
Thank you, Ms. Carol Hubbard. Mr. Dorn.
Um, I like the suggestions of deleting the note box, but moving that last sentence into the paragraph. Um, and part of this, I go, when this law was passed, others may remember, generally Pledge of Allegiance was recited in schools, or it might be alternated with Star Spangled Banner or something else, along those lines, but it was there. But this law really said it will be daily, but very specifically allows that not everybody is required to say it. And we have a number of people, foreign nationals, we have Jehovah's Witnesses who, have different, as one example of a group who is not against the concept, but don't make those types of pledges. And I think the point of, I was glad it was brought up, maintain a respectful silence, that if you don't, that's the expectation is respectful silence. And the law is pretty clear with that. I thought they did a good job on that, and we can reflect that. I would suggest that maybe we take a look at how we address this in the student handbooks. I believe it's there. And again, I think it's been a while since I looked at them specifically, but when they went by us several years ago, I thought the wording was pretty good. And it might be worth just looking at how we say it in our student handbooks as well. But just for this purpose, I like encourage, but that phrasing, a person, student is permitted to recite, et cetera, through respectful silence is good with me.
Thank you, Mr. Doran. I'm going to throw myself back in just because we seem to be hung up on the word encourage. If you put in a policy search for the word encourage, we use it a lot in our policy. And so I guess I would ask the board that if we are concerned about the word encourage, do we need to globally through our policy remove the word encourage? That would be my question. And then just one last comment in regards to the policy. We live in a really heavily military community, and so I just disagree with removing this. I follow the will of the board, but I just really disagree with removing this. Mr. Burgess.
Thank you. I just, again, I think this is really about freedom of expression and us encouraging something that is in this realm of freedom of expression, free speech, religious beliefs, whatever. I don't think that's an appropriate role for us to take. Even if it's, I understand the word is just encourages. We're not saying people must recite because that would be against state law for us to put that. But I just really think that it could be viewed as coercion. And I just want people to do a little thought exercise. And what if you took out? What if it said the board encourages students and staff to pray in the morning, or to something else? Like just substitute those words and think, would it still be okay? So I just, I'm not going to belabor the issue, but I do think that it's very important for us to be careful about that. If we're talking about a universal search for the word encourages, I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with using that word in when it is appropriate. I just think we need to be cautious that sometimes encouragement can be viewed as coercion or compulsion, and I just would want to be very cautious about that, and allow our students and staff the right to express themselves or not, however they see fit.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Mr. Doran.
Because you specifically asked about the word encourage. I think if you took that sentence, a person's student is encouraged to recite the salute to the flag or to maintain a respectful silence. We're not telling them to do it. We're encouraging it, which is a proactive civics education piece. And there are students, anyway, that speaks on its own. Or there is that to maintain that respectful silence. I do think it's appropriate in this situation because of the conversation within the legislature. There were those who wanted to require that everybody say it. And they recognize that there are some people for whom it would not be appropriate. And they left that open. So I think encourage is better than permitted, actually, because they're not only permitted to say it, or not. There's other connotations there, but I think encouraging it, that's what we do try to do within our schools and throughout the curriculum. But that if it's not appropriate, they can maintain a respectful silence, and that's what we expect. We treat each other. So I'm very comfortable with it. As I
Throwing water bottles, Mr. Doran.
I'm not really that worked up.
Jittery from all the tea.
What's that convincing over there?
Anything further on this one from the board? Seeing nothing, Ms. Dillard, do you have enough from the board for direction on this policy? Okay,
Further
Yeah.
conversation with administration, yes.
excellent. Okay. Moving on, we will go into 6116, classroom interruptions.
This is mostly our policies from 943 through 943.2 and 944. The only paragraph that is from ASB is the very first one.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dillard. Questions from the board? Mr. Dorn.
Wanted to get a little better understanding. It's just a clarification question from administration on what we mean by release time and whether it's clear enough in here. We release students to go on student activity trips, etc. I'm just trying to get a better sense of how this fits within classroom interruptions and what the understanding is when we talk about release time.
Dr. Minor?
I think it's referring to releasing from, the specific classroom that they're in to go to other school-sponsored activity or enrichment activities. But if there's a, better term than release time, I can see how, that's potentially confusing. I mean, I think you could get rid of that terminology altogether and say something along the lines of the building administrator may allow, I don't even know if you need that entire sentence, but allow classes to go on school-sponsored activities, during the school day, something along those lines. Release time is somewhat confusing,
Yeah, because I think it has some other connotations.
especially when you're talking about release time for staff, because that's where my mind goes. But we're not necessarily talking about that. We're talking about students.
And I'm thinking for assemblies as well as for those, that falls into that activities as
Mhm.
well as trips, et cetera.
Mhm.
So maybe my suggestion would be to let administration go back and perhaps reword that a little bit more appropriately and get feedback from principals that it makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Doran. Mrs. Julian?
Yeah, this is where I'm going to lean on the administration to make the recommendation here, and I'll trust whatever is put forth. There's a lot of anecdotal, I think, conversations that probably all of us board members have with educators around too many interruptions or wanting to have fewer, things that interrupt the regular classroom, because of course an educator has a flow and things that they need to achieve, and the more interruptions, the more that flow is disrupted. However, I also think that there's something to say about building a culture at a school and getting students excited to be there and looking forward to things. If you're not the student that's really excited for the math of the day. So I think that there's a balance, and I'm going to trust that the administration has, you know, given us that recommended. The only thing that I look at here, and this is if I put on my kind of educator lens that I've kind of cultivated, is there enough that an educator or a classroom teacher could lean on that says, hey, this is maybe a little too much interruption, because it is pretty open-ended, about minimizing interruptions to class time, not necessarily being explicit about what that means. So that's my only question.
I just sent some suggested language to Diana that could potentially go in this section, and happy to take it back and rework it as well. But this might say it a little clearer than what that first paragraph does. So it says, building administrators may permit student participation in instructional activities or school-sponsored events during the school day, provided it does not interfere with regular classroom performance. Efforts should be made to minimize the number of class periods or days a student misses during the school year.
Mr. Burgess?
To be clear, is that replacing the
That would replace that other
that whole
paragraph.
Okay,
Mhm.
yeah. Thank you, Ms. Dillard.
Mr. Doran?
And especially looking to those administrators who've also been principals, I read this in terms of not interfering with regular classroom performances. That if a kid is failing, I mean, some teams use or groups use academic markers. I mean, you have to be passing or you have to be, doing different things. So I think that still leaves good latitude for that conversation to be, or for principals to maybe have a conversation with a staff member when they're scheduling practices or games or tournaments, that there may be times when you say, well, okay, you've been out a lot, so I'm, can you move it a day or after school or what? I'm just saying that this gives latitude, and I'm particularly looking to the assistant superintendents as you're working with principals, gives them the latitude to work beneficially to everyone.
Ms. Gillum?
I would agree, and we have other policies that speak to that too, referring to that specifically. And when I read this, I'm thinking about, if I'm especially in a secondary setting, you know, and I'm a teacher, I'm going to be mindful of if I'm taking, you know, 8 field trips throughout the course of the year and now my students are missing other teachers' classes. That's especially at the secondary level where I would think of this, of that classroom interruptions. Like it may be educational for my classroom and my curriculum. However, I'm being really mindful as an administrator of how that impacts other teachers that that student has throughout the day.
Thank you, Ms. Gillum. Anything further on this one from the board? Seeing none. So we are currently at 7:45, so we're about 15 minutes over 7:30. We could jump into curriculum development or we could call it for the night. We do still have 72 pages of Article 6 to go over. So we will be on this one for a minute. What would be the direction of the board? Mr. Burgess?
I feel like this is probably a pretty good place to stop, but I would be interested in how many notes Mr. Doran has on this next section. If it's only a couple, maybe we can.
Mr. Burgess, we don't
Um,
ask questions we truly don't want the answer to.
um, this looks like this next section on curriculum seems like it could be a big one to me. So I would suggest that we stop for tonight. But I did want to also remind you I had a different topic, a slight still on policy, but I did want to take about 5 minutes to introduce something to the board if I could.
Yeah, absolutely. Which was another reason I wanted to see if we could wrap up right here. So we will go ahead and wrap up on policy. So the next time we pick up Article 6, we will pick up on 6141 curriculum development and evaluation. So thank you, board, for your work on policy tonight. With that, I know, Mr. Dorn, real quick.
Maybe when we come back to this, that we could get some of those updates that we've.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, Dr. Minor and I will work on our next work session for Article 6, and we'll make sure that the updates that we have gone through tonight will be implemented so we can get an update on it and then go from there. With that, Mrs. Julian.
Thank you. I have another question too. I just wanted to clarify the other policies that we discussed out of Article 6. So those that are pertaining to the charter school, I would be supportive of us moving those forward faster because the law has required us and put a timestamp on that. And hearing Dr. Minor, you say, when do we need to get this done ASAP? To me, I would hope that we can kind of get those in alignment sooner for a first reading and then a second reading.
Yeah, I actually heard tonight a consensus around getting these going. And so Dr. Minot and I will also work together on that for a first reading on our charter school policies and such. With that, we are going to turn it over to Mr. Burgess for a couple of minutes. He had something he would like to bring forward to the board.
Thank you. And yeah, I just want to let folks know, this is mostly a heads up, that I'm working on a resolution to support our immigrant families and staff in the light of the actions of the federal administration, and to clarify the roles and responsibilities of the board. We do have an AR that exists for that, but part of the my goal here is to develop some policy to strengthen that AR. And so this is a heads up for everyone that I intend to bring that forward. And I hope that we will be able to get a resolution on the agenda for August 19th. That's a goal. So I'm sure we'll be able to discuss it more at that time as well, but just thought I'd throw that out there for folks, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. It looks like Mr. Dorn might have a question for you.
I want to clarify that it's a resolution, not policy at this point that you're going to.
Currently, yes, but I wanted in the resolution to speak to developing policy as well. So that, if you follow, that will be, I intend for that to be part of the resolutions section, one of the clauses.
If I might then follow up, related to, I think it's appropriate for us to come up with a resolution. Thank you for working on that. And I think I would keep an eye on the idea of the resolution. If we pass it in time, that we could pass it on to AESB for consideration as an association resolution, because it does impact many, all of the school districts. And maybe we can talk a little bit about specifics at some point, but
Yeah,
ready
actually,
for the 19th, but we would have time to get one out and also get it out for association. So I think it's a great idea.
that I think, if I may, but apologies.
Go ahead,
Ms.
Mr.
Burnett.
Mr. Burgess.
Don't mean to speak out of turn, but yes, that I already had that intent as well, Mr. Doran, to bring that to AASB, and I would be happy to talk more with you about the process, AASB's process, or with you, Ms. Burnett, as since both of you are representatives on AASB currently, I believe. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. And with that, we are now adjourned.